The morning sun cast long shadows across the gravel of Paris Island as Sarah Chun laced up her worn running shoes for what would become the most extraordinary day in Marine Corps boot camp history. At 26, she was older than most recruits, her slight frame and quiet demeanor making her an easy target for the drill instructors, who thrived on breaking down the weak to build up warriors. What none of them knew was that Sarah carried within her a burning determination forged by years of adversity and a secret that would soon turn their entire understanding of physical capability upside down. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah had arrived at boot camp 3 weeks earlier with nothing but a battered duffel bag and the kind of humble confidence that comes from surviving life's harshest lessons. Her journey to this moment had been anything but conventional. Growing up in a small farming town in rural Nebraska, she had spent her childhood helping her grandfather maintain their family farm after her father abandoned them when she was 8 years old. The work was backbreaking, involving everything from hauling hay bales that weighed nearly as much as she did to chasing escaped cattle across miles of rough terrain in all kinds of weather. Her grandfather, Thomas Chun, was a first-generation immigrant who had worked himself from poverty to modest success through sheer determination and an work ethic that refused to acknowledge the word impossible. He had taught Sarah that physical strength wasn't about size or natural ability, but about mental toughness and the willingness to push beyond what your body thinks it can do. Every morning before school, Sarah would join him for a grueling routine that included splitting firewood, carrying feed bags, and maintaining equipment that required both strength and endurance to operate effectively. The other recruits at Paris Island saw only Sarah's unremarkable exterior. Standing barely 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighing less than 130 pounds, she looked like someone who had wandered into boot camp by mistake. Her voice was soft, her manner unassuming, and her responses to the drill instructor's verbal assaults were measured and respectful rather than defiant. This combination of physical modesty and quiet demeanor made her an immediate target for both the instructors and her fellow recruits, who assumed she would wash out within the first week. Drill Sergeant Marcus Thompson had been breaking down Marine recruits for over 15 years, and he prided himself on being able to identify the quitters within the first few days of training. Sarah Chun fit every profile of a recruit who wouldn't make it past the initial physical conditioning phase. Her scores on the initial fitness assessment had been mediocre at best, and her performance during the first weeks of training had been consistently average. Thompson had mentally categorized her as someone who would either drop out voluntarily or be discharged for failure to meet physical standards. The mockery began almost immediately after Sarah's arrival. During chow hall conversations, other recruits would speculate about how long she would last before requesting a discharge. Private James Rodriguez, a former high school football player from Texas, was particularly vocal about his doubts regarding Sarah's ability to complete the program. He had earned a reputation as one of the strongest recruits in the platoon, regularly outperforming others in strength, training exercises, and taking pride in his physical dominance over smaller or weaker individuals. Rodriguez had made it his personal mission to highlight Sarah's perceived inadequacies whenever possible. During group exercises, he would make comments about her form or suggest that she should consider transferring to a desk job in the rear, instead of wasting everyone's time pretending she could be a Marine. His comments were always delivered with just enough humor to avoid official reprimand, but they carried an undertone of genuine disdain that made them particularly cutting. Private Lisa Murphy, who had joined the Marines after completing a successful college athletic career, initially felt some sympathy for Sarah, but gradually began to distance herself as it became clear that associating with the perceived weak link could affect her own standing within the platoon. Murphy had her own ambitions within the Marine Corps and understood that military culture rewarded strength and punished weakness without regard for personal feelings or social sensitivities. The training environment at Parris Island was deliberately designed to create stress and pressure that would reveal each recruit's true character under adverse conditions. The physical demands were intense, with daily routines that included long runs, obstacle courses, strength training, and combat exercises that pushed everyone to their limits. Sarah consistently performed at a level that met minimum standards but rarely exceeded them, reinforcing the general perception that she was someone who was just barely hanging on rather than thriving in the challenging environment. Drill Sergeant Thompson's treatment of Sarah reflected his professional assessment that she was unlikely to succeed in the long term. His verbal corrections were sharper when directed at her, and he seemed to take particular pleasure in pointing out her shortcomings during group exercises. Thompson believed that this approach would either motivate Sarah to improve dramatically or encourage her to recognize her limitations and withdraw from the program voluntarily. The psychological pressure of being constantly scrutinized and criticized began to take its toll on Sarah's interactions with her fellow recruits. Mealtimes became uncomfortable as conversations would stop when she approached, and training partnerships were formed around her rather than including her. The isolation was not entirely intentional on the part of her peers, but it reflected the natural tendency of groups to distance themselves from individuals who were perceived as liabilities. Sarah's response to this treatment was characteristic of the quiet strength she had developed during her years on the farm. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Rather than becoming defensive or confrontational, she absorbed the criticism and used it as motivation to examine her own performance more critically. She began staying awake later than the other recruits, reviewing the techniques and procedures they had learned during the day and mentally rehearsing ways to improve her execution. The physical training regimen at Parris Island was comprehensive and demanding, designed to transform civilians into Marines capable of operating effectively in combat situations around the world. The program included cardiovascular conditioning, strength training, flexibility work, and skill-based exercises that tested coordination, balance, and mental toughness. Sarah participated in all of these activities with consistent effort, but her results remained unremarkable compared to the more naturally gifted athletes in her platoon. What her fellow recruits and instructors didn't understand was that Sarah's approach to physical training was fundamentally different from theirs. While they focused on immediate performance and visible results, she was building a foundation of endurance and mental resilience that would serve her well in longer, more demanding challenges. Her grandfather had taught her that true strength was like a deep well that could be drawn upon when surface resources were exhausted. The farm work that had shaped Sarah's early development had been less about explosive power and more about sustained effort over extended periods. She had learned to pace herself during long days of physical labor, conserving energy for the tasks that mattered most while maintaining steady productivity throughout. This approach didn't translate well to the short, intense exercises that dominated the early phases of boot camp training, but it had prepared her for challenges that required different types of physical and mental endurance. Sarah's living quarters were shared with 3 other recruits, including Private Jennifer Walsh, who had joined the Marines after working as a personal trainer in civilian life. Walsh was naturally athletic and had quickly established herself as one of the top performers in physical training exercises. Her success had earned her informal leadership status among the female recruits, and her opinion of Sarah's capabilities carried significant weight with the others. Walsh's assessment of Sarah was professional, but not particularly encouraging. She recognized that Sarah was making an honest effort to improve, but she questioned whether that effort would be sufficient to meet the increasingly demanding standards that lay ahead. Walsh had seen other recruits with similar profiles struggle, and ultimately fail when the training became more intense. And she believed that Sarah was following a similar trajectory toward eventual failure. The training schedule at Parris Island was relentless, with physical conditioning sessions scheduled throughout each day in addition to weapons training, classroom instruction, and military-bearing exercises. Sarah approached each session with the same quiet determination, but her performance remained consistently average rather than exceptional. This pattern reinforced the general perception that she was someone who was working hard, but lacked the natural ability to excel in the demanding environment. Drill Sergeant Thompson had begun to focus more attention on Sarah's performance as the training progressed, not because he saw potential for improvement, but because he wanted to document her shortcomings thoroughly before recommending her for discharge. His evaluations were detailed and critical, noting specific areas where her performance fell short of Marine Corps standards and questioning whether additional training would be sufficient to bring her up to acceptable levels. The obstacle course at Parris Island was particularly challenging for Sarah, requiring a combination of upper body strength, agility, and confidence that she had not yet fully developed. Her times were consistently among the slowest in the platoon, and her technique on several obstacles revealed weaknesses that concerned the instructors. Thompson had made note of these issues in his training reports, building a case for Sarah's eventual removal from the program. Combat training exercises presented additional challenges for Sarah, as they required not only physical capability, but also the kind of aggressive mindset that Marines needed to develop for combat effectiveness. Sarah's natural temperament was more suited to careful analysis and measured response than to the explosive action that characterized effective combat techniques. Her performance in these exercises was technically competent, but lacked the intensity and conviction that instructors looked for in successful Marine candidates. The weapons training portion of the program was one area where Sarah showed slightly more promise, as her farm background had given her some familiarity with firearms and mechanical systems. However, even in this area, her performance was merely adequate rather than exceptional. She could hit targets consistently and maintain her weapon properly, but she lacked the natural marksmanship ability that some recruits displayed almost immediately. Sarah's approach to studying military history, tactics, and procedures was characteristically thorough and methodical. She absorbed information carefully and could recall details accurately during examinations, but she struggled to apply that knowledge quickly and decisively during practical exercises. This pattern suggested to her instructors that she might be better suited for support roles rather than combat positions within the Marine Corps structure. The social dynamics within Sarah's platoon had evolved into a clear hierarchy based primarily on physical performance and leadership potential. Sarah found herself near the bottom of this informal ranking system, treated politely but not included in the groups that formed among the higher-performing recruits. This isolation wasn't necessarily hostile, but it reinforced her status as someone who was not expected to succeed at the highest levels. Private Rodriguez had continued his pattern of subtle mockery and exclusion, often making comments about Sarah's performance that were technically within acceptable bounds, but clearly intended to undermine her confidence and social standing. His behavior was typical of the kind of competitive environment that military training was designed to create, where weakness was identified and exploited as a way of strengthening the overall group. The approaching final evaluation phase of boot camp training was creating additional stress for all the recruits, but particularly for those like Sarah who were considered borderline candidates for successful completion. The final tests would include comprehensive physical fitness assessments, combat skills evaluations, and leadership exercises that would determine each recruit's suitability for advancement to specialized training programs. Sarah understood that her position within the platoon was precarious and that her performance during the final evaluations would determine not only her immediate success, but also her long-term opportunities within the Marine Corps. The pressure was intense. But it was also familiar to her from the years she had spent proving herself on the farm when others doubted her ability to handle demanding physical work. The evening before the final physical training evaluation, Sarah lay in her bunk thinking about the journey that had brought her to this point. The path had been longer and more difficult than she had anticipated, marked by constant doubt from others and occasional moments of self-doubt that she had learned to overcome through sheer determination. But she also knew that everything she had experienced so far had been preparation for tomorrow's challenge, when she would finally have the opportunity to demonstrate what she was truly capable of achieving. Her grandfather's voice echoed in her memory from one of their last conversations before she left for boot camp. He had told her that true strength wasn't about proving yourself to others, but about discovering what you could accomplish when everything depended on your own determination and preparation. Tomorrow would be that test, and Sarah was ready to show everyone, including herself, what years of quiet preparation and unwavering determination could produce when the stakes were highest. The pre-dawn hours at Parris Island were always quiet. But on this particular morning, there was an electric tension in the air as recruits prepared for what would be the most comprehensive physical evaluation of their boot camp experience. Sarah Chun had awakened before the official reveille, using the extra minutes to center herself mentally and review the techniques she had been refining over the past 3 weeks. What none of her fellow recruits realized was that those weeks of seemingly mediocre performance had been carefully calculated preparation for this single day when everything would be revealed. The evaluation would consist of multiple components designed to test every aspect of physical capability that the Marine Corps valued in its personnel. The morning would begin with a 3-mile run, followed by maximum repetition exercises in pull-ups, sit-ups, and push-ups. The afternoon would feature obstacle course runs, combat fitness tests, and specialized challenges that would push each recruit to their absolute limits. Sarah had studied the evaluation criteria obsessively, understanding that this was her opportunity to demonstrate capabilities that she had deliberately kept hidden during the preliminary training phases. Drill Sergeant Thompson conducted the pre-evaluation briefing with his characteristic intensity, outlining the standards that each recruit would need to meet, and emphasizing that failure in any single component could result in recycling through additional training or discharge from the program entirely. His eyes lingered on Sarah as he delivered the warnings about the consequences of inadequate performance, clearly expecting that she would be among those who struggled to meet the demanding requirements. The first component of the evaluation was the 3-mile run, conducted in formation with times recorded for each individual recruit. Sarah had consistently performed this exercise at a pace that met minimum standards but never exceeded them by any significant margin. Her fellow recruits expected her to struggle with maintaining the required pace, particularly given the pressure of knowing that this performance would contribute significantly to her overall evaluation score. What happened next would become the subject of Marine Corps training folklore for years to come. As the formation began moving at the standard pace, Sarah settled into a rhythm that seemed familiar and comfortable. But as the run progressed, it became clear that she was not only maintaining the pace effortlessly, but was actually holding herself back to stay with the group. Her breathing remained controlled and steady while other recruits began showing signs of exertion, and her stride carried an efficiency that suggested she could continue at this pace indefinitely. Private Rodriguez, who had been running near Sarah and making occasional comments about her ability to keep up, gradually found himself falling behind her effortless pace. His own breathing became labored as he struggled to maintain a speed that Sarah seemed to be handling without any significant effort. The realization that she was outpacing him without apparent strain was both surprising and somewhat humiliating for someone who had built his reputation on physical superiority over smaller or apparently weaker recruits. As the run entered its final mile, Drill Sergeant Thompson, who was monitoring the formation from a vehicle, began to notice that Sarah's position within the group had shifted dramatically. She was no longer struggling to keep up with the minimum standard, but was instead moving closer to the front of the formation, passing recruits who had previously been considered among the strongest runners in the platoon. Her form remained smooth and controlled, while others around her showed increasing signs of fatigue and strain. The finish line brought the first major surprise of the day, as Sarah completed the 3-mile run with a time that not only exceeded Marine Corps' standards, but actually set a new record for female recruits at the Parris Island facility. Her time was more than 2 minutes faster than any previous female recruit had achieved, and it would have been competitive among the male recruits as well. The electronic timing system was checked twice to ensure accuracy, as the result seemed impossible given Sarah's previous performances. But the real shock came from Sarah's condition immediately after completing the run. While other recruits were bent over, breathing heavily and showing clear signs of exhaustion, Sarah appeared barely winded. Her breathing was only slightly elevated, her face showed minimal signs of exertion, and she moved with the same controlled efficiency that had characterized her stride throughout the run. It was as if she had completed a moderate training exercise, rather than a maximum effort evaluation that had pushed her peers to their limits. Drill Sergeant Thompson's initial reaction was skepticism, assuming that there had been some kind of error in the timing system, or that Sarah had somehow taken a shortcut during the run. However, multiple witnesses and the continuous monitoring system confirmed that she had completed the full distance at the recorded pace. The result forced Thompson to reconsider everything he thought he knew about Sarah's physical capabilities and potential for success in the Marine Corps. The pull-up portion of the evaluation provided the second revelation of the day. Sarah approached the bar with the same quiet confidence she had displayed throughout her training, but what followed defied every expectation that had been established during the previous weeks. Instead of the modest number of repetitions that her previous performances had suggested, Sarah began executing pull-ups with perfect form and steady rhythm that showed no signs of slowing down. Private Walsh, who had established herself as the strongest female recruit in upper body exercises, watched in amazement as Sarah surpassed her previous best performance and continued climbing toward numbers that seemed impossible for someone of her size and apparent strength level. The technique Sarah employed was flawless, with each repetition demonstrating the kind of efficiency and control that typically required years of specialized training to develop. The count continued climbing as Sarah maintained her steady rhythm, passing 20 repetitions, then 30, then 40, with no apparent decrease in her ability to continue. Other recruits had stopped their own exercises to watch what was becoming an extraordinary display of upper body strength and endurance. Drill Sergeant Thompson found himself counting aloud as the numbers reached levels that exceeded not only female standards, but challenged the records established by male recruits as well. When Sarah finally completed her set and dropped from the bar, she had performed 63 perfect pull-ups, establishing a new facility record that exceeded the previous mark by more than 20 repetitions. The achievement was so far beyond normal expectations that several witnesses requested verification from additional instructors before the official record could be established. Sarah's breathing remained controlled throughout the exercise, and she showed no signs of the muscle failure that typically ended maximum repetition attempts. The sit-up evaluation that followed produced similar results, with Sarah maintaining perfect form and steady pace through numbers that quickly exceeded any previous performance by female recruits at the facility. Her core strength and endurance appeared to be unlimited as she continued through repetitions that left other recruits exhausted just from watching. The final count of 147 sit-ups in the allotted time period established another facility record and confirmed that Sarah's extraordinary performances were not isolated incidents, but part of a comprehensive physical capability that had been deliberately hidden during training. The push-up component of the evaluation completed the morning's revelations, as Sarah demonstrated the same combination of perfect technique and seemingly unlimited endurance that had characterized her other exercises. Her form remained textbook perfect through repetitions that quickly surpassed any previous female record at the facility, and her pace never wavered despite the accumulating fatigue that would normally affect performance. The final count of 96 push-ups established yet another facility record and left witnesses questioning everything they thought they understood about physical training and capability assessment. But perhaps the most remarkable aspect of Sarah's morning performance was not the individual records she established, but the apparent ease with which she achieved them. While other recruits were pushing themselves to their absolute limits and showing clear signs of maximum exertion, Sarah appeared to be working well within her capabilities. Her breathing remained controlled, her movement stayed smooth and efficient, and her recovery between exercises was remarkably quick. The reaction from her fellow recruits was a mixture of amazement, confusion, and in some cases, resentment at having been deceived about Sarah's true capabilities. Private Rodriguez, who had spent weeks mocking Sarah's apparent weaknesses, found himself confronting the uncomfortable reality that he had been completely wrong about her abilities. His own performance during the morning evaluations, while respectable, paled in comparison to Sarah's record-setting achievements. Private Walsh's response was more professional, but equally surprised, as she recognized that Sarah's performances represented a level of physical preparation and capability that went far beyond anything she had observed during their training together. Walsh began to reconsider her previous assessments of Sarah's potential, and to wonder what other surprises might be revealed during the remaining components of the evaluation. Drill Sergeant Thompson's reaction was perhaps the most complex, as Sarah's extraordinary performances forced him to acknowledge that his professional assessment of her capabilities had been completely inaccurate. His initial skepticism gave way to grudging admiration, as he realized that Sarah had deliberately concealed her true abilities during training, revealing them only when the stakes were highest. The implications of this strategy suggested a level of tactical thinking and self-discipline that was unusual even among successful Marine recruits. The lunch break before the afternoon evaluations provided an opportunity for Sarah to reflect on the morning's events and prepare mentally for the challenges that lay ahead. She had revealed a significant portion of her capabilities, but the afternoon would bring different types of tests that would require her to demonstrate skills that went beyond basic strength and endurance. The obstacle course, combat fitness tests, and specialized challenges would test agility, coordination, tactical thinking, and the kind of explosive power that was different from the sustained efforts she had demonstrated in the morning. Sarah's approach to the afternoon evaluations would need to be different from her morning strategy, as the exercises would be more varied and would require quick adaptation to changing challenges. However, her grandfather's training had prepared her for exactly these kinds of situations, where success depended on the ability to apply fundamental principles to new and unexpected circumstances. The farm work that had shaped her development had included many tasks that required quick thinking, rapid adaptation, and the kind of problem-solving skills that would be essential for the afternoon's challenges. The transformation in how others perceived Sarah was already evident during the lunch break, as conversations that had previously excluded her now included questions about her training background and methods. The respect in these interactions was genuine but also somewhat wary, as her fellow recruits struggled to reconcile the extraordinary performances they had witnessed with the modest, unassuming person they thought they knew. As the afternoon evaluations approached, Sarah understood that the morning's successes had established new expectations that would be difficult to maintain. However, she also knew that everything she had accomplished so far was simply preparation for the ultimate test of whether she could apply her capabilities to the more complex and demanding challenges that lay ahead. The obstacle course would test her agility and coordination. The combat fitness exercises would evaluate her ability to apply strength and endurance to tactical situations, and the specialized challenges would determine whether her physical gifts could be translated into the kind of comprehensive capability that the Marine Corps required of its personnel. The afternoon sun was beginning to cast longer shadows across the Parris Island training grounds as Sarah prepared for what would prove to be the most demanding and spectacular portion of her evaluation day. The obstacle course at Parris Island stretched across 2 acres of carefully designed challenges that had broken the spirits of countless recruits over the decades. 23 individual obstacles ranging from rope climbs and wall traversals to mud crawls and balance beams created a gauntlet that tested every aspect of physical and mental capability. Sarah approached the starting line with the same quiet confidence that had characterized her morning performances, but the whispers from the gathered crowd of instructors and recruits revealed that expectations had changed dramatically since her record-breaking displays earlier in the day. Drill Sergeant Thompson had positioned himself at the halfway point of the course, his clipboard ready to document what he still hoped might be a return to the mediocre performances that had characterized Sarah's previous training. Despite the morning's extraordinary results, Thompson maintained his professional skepticism about Sarah's ability to translate raw strength and endurance into the complex combination of skills required for obstacle course success. The course demanded not just physical capability, but also tactical thinking, risk assessment, and the kind of aggressive confidence that Marines needed in combat situations. Staff Sergeant Maria Rodriguez had joined the evaluation team specifically to observe Sarah's performance, having heard reports about the morning's record-breaking achievements that seemed too extraordinary to believe. Rodriguez was a veteran of multiple combat deployments and had served as an instructor at various Marine Corps training facilities for over 8 years. Her presence at the evaluation represented the kind of high-level attention that was normally reserved for recruits who showed exceptional leadership potential or those who were facing possible discharge from the program. The first obstacle was a 10-foot rope climb that required upper body strength and technique to complete efficiently. Most recruits approached this challenge with visible apprehension, knowing that failure here could set a negative tone for the entire course. Sarah grasped the rope with practiced hands, her technique immediately revealing training that went far beyond the basic instruction provided during boot camp. Her ascent was smooth and controlled, completed in a time that would have been impressive for male recruits and was unprecedented for females at the facility. But it was Sarah's descent that truly captured the attention of the observers. Instead of using the standard hand-over-hand technique that most recruits employed, she controlled her descent with a rappelling motion that demonstrated advanced rope handling skills. The technique was not only faster than conventional methods, but also revealed a level of comfort with heights and rope work that suggested extensive prior experience. Her feet touched the ground with barely a sound, and she immediately moved toward the next obstacle without the recovery pause that most recruits required. The tire run that followed consisted of 24 truck tires arranged in a pattern that required precise foot placement and rhythmic coordination to navigate successfully. Sarah's approach was methodical but fluid, her feet finding the optimal placement on each tire with the kind of precision that normally required multiple practice runs to achieve. Her pace through the obstacle was not only fast but also remarkably consistent, maintaining the same rhythm from start to finish without the stumbles or corrections that characterized most attempts. Private Rodriguez, who had been following Sarah's progress through the course, found himself falling further behind, despite his reputation as one of the platoon's most athletic recruits. His own technique was competent, but lacked the efficiency and precision that Sarah demonstrated at each obstacle. The realization that he was being outperformed by someone he had consistently mocked was both humbling and frustrating, forcing him to confront the possibility that his previous assessments had been based on prejudice rather than accurate observation. The wall traverse presented a different type of challenge, requiring upper body strength and coordination to move horizontally across a 12-foot barrier using only handholds. Sarah's approach revealed climbing techniques that were far more advanced than anything taught in basic training. Her hand placement was precise and efficient, her body position optimized for maintaining momentum while minimizing energy expenditure. She completed the traverse in a time that established another facility record, while making the difficult exercise appear effortless. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez found herself taking detailed notes as Sarah progressed through each obstacle, documenting techniques and performance levels that challenged her understanding of what was possible for recruits at this stage of training. Sarah's methods were not only effective, but also revealed a systematic approach to physical challenges that suggested formal training or extensive practical experience. The consistency of her performance across diverse obstacle types indicated comprehensive preparation rather than natural talent in any single area. The rope bridge obstacle required balance, coordination, and confidence to cross a 30-foot span suspended 8 feet above the ground. Most recruits approach this challenge with visible nervousness, understanding that a fall could result in injury as well as time penalties that would affect their overall score. Sarah stepped onto the rope with the kind of casual confidence that suggested this was a familiar challenge rather than something new and intimidating. Her progression across the bridge revealed balance and coordination skills that were exceptional even by Marine Corps standards. Her movements were smooth and controlled, her center of gravity perfectly maintained despite the natural movement of the rope structure. She completed the crossing in record time while maintaining perfect form throughout, never showing the wobbling or hesitation that characterized most attempts at this obstacle. The mud crawl that followed was designed to test endurance and mental toughness rather than technical skill, requiring recruits to low crawl under barbed wire through 50 yards of mud and water. The obstacle was intended to be miserable and exhausting, breaking down recruits psychologically while testing their ability to continue performing under uncomfortable conditions. Sarah entered the mud with the same methodical approach she had shown throughout the course, her technique optimized for speed and efficiency rather than comfort. Her progress through the mud crawl was remarkable not only for its speed, but also for the apparent ease with which she maintained her pace, despite the increasingly difficult conditions, while other recruits slowed down as fatigue and discomfort accumulated. Sarah's rhythm remained consistent from start to finish. Her emergence from the mud revealed someone who appeared to have completed a routine training exercise rather than one of the most demanding obstacles on the course. The horizontal ladder that came next required upper body strength and coordination to traverse 20 rungs without touching the ground. Most recruits struggled with this obstacle, their grip strength failing before they could complete the full distance. Sarah's approach revealed hand and grip strength that seemed unlimited, her progression across the ladder smooth and controlled despite the accumulating fatigue from previous obstacles. Her technique was flawless, each hand placement precise and efficient, her body position optimized to minimize stress on her grip. She completed the obstacle without any apparent difficulty, her hands showing no signs of the fatigue that typically ended most attempts at this challenge. The display of upper body endurance was particularly impressive given the demanding obstacles she had already completed without any significant recovery time. Private Walsh, who had been observing Sarah's progress with professional interest, found herself completely reevaluating her previous assessments of Sarah's capabilities and potential. The performances she was witnessing went far beyond anything she had expected based on Sarah's training record, suggesting either deliberate deception during the preparatory phase or an extraordinary ability to perform under pressure that hadn't been revealed in routine training situations. The balance beam obstacle required precision and confidence to traverse a 4-inch wide beam elevated 6 feet above the ground. Most recruits approached this challenge with extreme caution, understanding that a fall would result in both time penalties and potential injury. Sarah stepped onto the beam with the same confident approach she had demonstrated throughout the course, her movement fluid and controlled as she navigated the 30-foot span. Her balance and coordination were exceptional, her body maintaining perfect alignment despite the narrow support surface and the psychological pressure of the elevation. She completed the traverse at a pace that seemed impossibly fast for such a demanding balance challenge, never showing the hesitation or wobbling that characterized most successful attempts. Her dismount from the beam was smooth and controlled, landing with the kind of precision that suggested extensive gymnastics or dance training. The cargo net climb that followed was one of the most physically demanding obstacles on the course, requiring both upper body strength and coordination to ascend a 20-foot vertical net and then descend the opposite side. Sarah's approach revealed climbing skills that were far beyond basic training level, her technique demonstrating efficiency and safety awareness that could only come from extensive experience with similar challenges. Her ascent was rapid but controlled, each hand and foot placement optimal for maintaining momentum while ensuring security. Her transition over the top of the net was smooth and confident, revealing comfort with heights and complex movement that most recruits took weeks to develop. Her descent was equally impressive, controlled and efficient without the hesitation that typically slowed most attempts at this obstacle. The tire flip challenge required functional strength and technique to move a 400-pound tractor tire across a 20-yard distance. This obstacle was designed to test the kind of real-world strength that Marines needed for combat logistics and equipment handling. Sarah's approach revealed lifting and moving techniques that demonstrated extensive experience with heavy objects and manual labor. Her technique was textbook perfect, using proper body mechanics to maximize efficiency while minimizing injury risk. Her progress across the distance was steady and controlled, the massive tire moving with a rhythm that suggested this was familiar work rather than an extraordinary challenge. Her completion time established another facility record while demonstrating functional strength that exceeded most male recruits despite her smaller physical frame. The final sprint to the finish line represented the culmination of the most comprehensive obstacle course evaluation in Parris Island history. Sarah's pace remained strong and controlled despite having completed 23 demanding obstacles without any significant rest or recovery time. Her stride showed no signs of the fatigue that had accumulated in other recruits. Her breathing remained controlled, and her movement retained the efficiency and precision that had characterized her performance throughout the course. Her finish line time of 12 minutes and 37 seconds established a new facility record that exceeded the previous mark by over 2 minutes. More importantly, her time would have been competitive in male recruit evaluations and represented a level of comprehensive physical performance that challenged existing understanding of human capability and training effectiveness. The achievement was documented by multiple timing systems and witnessed by a growing crowd of instructors and support staff who had gathered to observe what was becoming a legendary performance. But perhaps even more remarkable than the record time was Sarah's condition immediately after completing the course. While other recruits were exhausted and required medical evaluation for heat stress and dehydration, Sarah appeared ready to repeat the entire course immediately. Her breathing was only slightly elevated, her movement remained fluid and controlled, and she showed no signs of the muscle fatigue that typically followed maximum effort obstacle course attempts. The reaction from the gathered observers was unprecedented in the history of Marine Corps recruit training. Instructors who had witnessed thousands of recruits attempt the obstacle course found themselves questioning their understanding of human physical capability and the effectiveness of traditional training methods. Sarah's performance had not only exceeded every existing record, but had done so by margins that seemed to indicate a fundamental difference in preparation and capability. Drill Sergeant Thompson's professional skepticism had been completely overwhelmed by the evidence of Sarah's extraordinary abilities. His initial assumption that her morning performances were anomalies or measurement errors had been replaced by the recognition that he was witnessing something truly exceptional. His evaluation notes reflected not only the objective measurements of Sarah's performance, but also his professional assessment that her capabilities exceeded anything he had encountered in 15 years of Marine Corps service. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez's documentation of Sarah's performance was equally comprehensive, noting not only the record-breaking times and technique excellence, but also the apparent ease with which she had achieved these results. Her notes reflected the professional assessment that Sarah's performance represented a new standard for recruit capability and suggested training methods or background experiences that were far beyond normal recruit preparation. The afternoon combat fitness evaluations that followed the obstacle course provided additional opportunities for Sarah to demonstrate capabilities that continued to challenge existing assumptions about recruit training and performance standards. The combat fitness test was designed to simulate the physical demands that Marines faced in actual combat situations, combining strength, endurance, agility, and tactical thinking in scenarios that replicated real-world challenges. The movement under fire exercise required recruits to navigate a complex course while carrying full combat equipment and responding to simulated enemy contact. The challenge tested not only physical capability, but also the ability to maintain tactical awareness and decision-making effectiveness under stress and fatigue. Sarah's approach revealed tactical thinking and situational awareness that were far beyond basic training level, suggesting military experience or training that had not been documented in her official record. Her movement through the course was efficient and tactically sound, her equipment handling professional and confident. She maintained proper tactical spacing and cover utilization while achieving movement times that established new performance standards. Her simulation of combat procedures was textbook perfect, demonstrating knowledge and instincts that typically required months of specialized training to develop. The combat equipment carry that concluded the afternoon evaluations required recruits to transport various items of military equipment across measured distances within specified time limits. The exercise was designed to test functional strength and endurance under conditions that simulated battlefield logistics requirements. Sarah's performance revealed strength and endurance, capabilities that continued to exceed all previous facility records, while maintaining the apparent ease that had characterized her entire day of evaluations. Her completion of the combat fitness tests with perfect scores and record-breaking times provided final confirmation that her extraordinary morning performances were not isolated incidents, but part of comprehensive physical and tactical capabilities that challenged every assumption that had been made about her potential. The accumulated evidence suggested training and preparation that went far beyond normal recruit background and raised questions about how such capabilities could have remained hidden during weeks of routine training exercises. As the formal evaluation period concluded, Sarah found herself surrounded by instructors and fellow recruits who were struggling to reconcile the extraordinary performances they had witnessed with their previous understanding of her capabilities and potential. The transformation in how she was perceived had been complete and dramatic, but it also created new expectations and pressures that would influence every aspect of her remaining boot camp experience. The documentation of Sarah's record-breaking day would become part of Marine Corps' training history, but more immediately, it established her as someone whose capabilities and potential demanded a complete reevaluation of training assignments and career opportunities. The question facing her instructors was not whether she would successfully complete boot camp, but rather how to channel her extraordinary abilities toward the roles where they could be most effectively utilized in service. To the Marine Corps' mission. The emergency klaxon that shattered the pre-dawn silence at Parris Island was not part of any scheduled training exercise. At 0347 hours, Hurricane Delilah had unexpectedly shifted course and was now bearing down on the South Carolina coast with winds projected to exceed 120 miles per hour. The storm's arrival would coincide with the final graduation exercise that had been planned for the following day, creating a crisis that would test every aspect of Marine Corps' emergency preparedness and evacuation procedures. Colonel Patricia Hayes stood in the base command center, studying weather reports that painted an increasingly dire picture of the approaching storm system. The hurricane's path would place Parris Island directly in the storm's eye within 18 hours, requiring the immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel and the implementation of emergency protocols that had not been activated in over a decade. The timing could not have been worse, as the base currently housed its largest recruit population in years, including several companies that were scheduled to graduate within the next week. The evacuation order that followed was comprehensive and immediate. All recruit training would be suspended, graduation ceremonies postponed indefinitely, and personnel would be transported to inland facilities until the storm passed in damage. Assessments could be completed. The logistics of moving over 3,000 recruits, instructors, and support staff to temporary facilities was complex enough under normal circumstances, but the approaching hurricane compressed the timeline to a matter of hours rather than days. Sarah Chun found herself assigned to Evacuation Team 7, responsible for securing and transporting essential training equipment from the physical fitness facility to inland storage locations. The assignment was routine and undemanding, designed to keep recruits productive while ensuring their safety during the evacuation process. However, what should have been a straightforward logistics operation was about to become something far more challenging and dangerous due to a series of equipment failures and communication breakdowns that would place lives at risk. The transportation convoy that was supposed to collect Sarah's team had been delayed by mechanical problems with two of the assigned vehicles, leaving them stranded at the physical fitness facility with a growing pile of equipment that needed to be moved before the storm's arrival. The facility's location on the eastern edge of the base made it particularly vulnerable to storm surge and wind damage, requiring complete evacuation of all personnel and equipment well before the hurricane made landfall. Sergeant First Class David Kim had been placed in charge of the evacuation team, but his experience was primarily in administrative rather than emergency operations. His initial response to the transportation delay was to wait for replacement vehicles, following standard protocols that assumed normal operating conditions and adequate time for problem resolution. However, the approaching hurricane created time pressures that made standard procedures inadequate for ensuring mission completion and personnel safety. The communication breakdown that followed compounded the developing crisis. The base's primary communication system had been damaged by high winds from the storm's outer bands, leaving evacuation teams with only emergency radio channels that were quickly becoming overloaded with competing priorities. Kim's attempts to coordinate replacement transportation were unsuccessful, as higher priority evacuations were consuming all available resources and personnel. Private Rodriguez, who had been assigned to the same evacuation team, initially maintained his professional composure, despite the growing stress of the situation. However, as the hours passed and the storm continued to intensify, his confidence began to erode. The wind was now gusting to over 60 miles per hour, making outdoor work dangerous and communication nearly impossible. His previous combat experience had not prepared him for the unique challenges of hurricane conditions, where visibility was limited and environmental hazards changed rapidly. The crisis reached its peak when structural damage to the facility's roof created an immediate safety hazard that required emergency evacuation of all remaining personnel. A section of metal roofing had been torn away by the wind, creating a projectile hazard that made the building unsafe for continued occupation. The remaining equipment would have to be abandoned unless an alternative solution could be implemented immediately, representing a significant loss of critical training. Materials that would affect operations for months after the storm passed. Sarah's response to the crisis revealed leadership capabilities and emergency problem-solving skills that had not been apparent during routine training exercises. Her assessment of the situation was rapid and comprehensive, identifying both the immediate safety hazards and the potential solutions that could allow mission completion without unnecessary risk to personnel. Her approach was methodical but decisive, demonstrating the kind of tactical thinking that Marines needed in combat situations where standard procedures were inadequate. Her first recommendation was to establish an alternate evacuation route that would avoid the damaged sections of the building while still allowing access to the most critical equipment. The route she proposed required physical capabilities that exceeded normal expectations, including climbing and load carrying that would challenge even well-conditioned Marines. However, her analysis of the risks versus benefits convinced Sergeant Kim that the approach was both feasible and necessary given the deteriorating conditions. The evacuation plan that Sarah developed required her to access equipment storage areas that had become inaccessible through normal routes due to structural damage and debris. Her approach involved climbing skills and problem-solving abilities that demonstrated training and experience far beyond basic boot camp preparation. She moved through the damaged facility with confidence and efficiency, locating and securing equipment while maintaining continuous assessment of changing safety conditions. Private Walsh, who had been observing Sarah's leadership during the crisis, found herself following Sarah's directions rather than Sergeant Kim's, recognizing that Sarah's assessment of the situation was more accurate and her proposed solutions more practical. Walsh's professional training as a civilian emergency medical technician had given her experience with crisis situations, and she understood that effective leadership often emerged from competence rather than rank, particularly when lives were at stake. The equipment recovery operation that Sarah organized required extraordinary physical capability and coordination among team members who were working under increasingly dangerous conditions. The hurricane's approach had created wind conditions that made lifting and carrying heavy objects extremely hazardous, while debris and structural damage created obstacles that required constant adaptation and problem-solving to overcome successfully. Sarah's performance during the recovery operation revealed strength and endurance capabilities that exceeded even her previous record-breaking displays. She carried loads that would have challenged multiple Marines working together while maintaining the coordination and safety awareness necessary to operate effectively in the dangerous environment. Her ability to maintain peak performance under extreme stress and physical demands demonstrated the kind of exceptional capability that the Marine Corps sought in its most elite personnel. The coordination required to move the recovered equipment to safety points outside the building tested Sarah's leadership and tactical planning abilities under conditions that simulated combat operations. She organized her team members according to their individual strengths and capabilities, assigned responsibilities that maximized efficiency while maintaining safety margins, and maintained continuous communication and situation assessment despite the challenging environmental conditions. But the most critical test came when Private Martinez, one of the younger members of the evacuation team, became trapped under debris when a weakened ceiling section collapsed during the equipment recovery operation. The accident occurred in an area of the building that had been considered stable, but the hurricane's intensifying winds had created structural stresses that exceeded the building's design limits. Martinez was conscious but unable to free himself from the heavy concrete and metal that had pinned his legs. The rescue operation that followed would test every aspect of Sarah's capabilities and training under conditions where failure meant serious injury or death for a fellow Marine. The debris that trapped Martinez was too heavy for normal lifting techniques, requiring specialized approaches and equipment that were not readily available. Additionally, the continued deterioration of the building's structure meant that the rescue had to be completed quickly before additional collapses made the situation even more dangerous. Sarah's approach to the rescue demonstrated engineering knowledge and physics understanding that allowed her to develop a lever system using available materials to lift the debris safely. Her solution required precise calculation of forces and angles, combined with careful coordination of team members to ensure that the lifting operation would be successful without creating additional hazards. The technique she employed was not covered in basic Marine Corps training but represented practical problem-solving skills that suggested extensive background experience with mechanical systems and emergency situations. The physical demands of implementing the rescue plan pushed Sarah's capabilities to their absolute limits for the first time during her boot camp experience. The leverage system she had designed required her to generate and sustain forces that would have challenged multiple Marines working together, while maintaining the precision and control necessary to avoid causing additional injury to Martinez. Her performance during the rescue revealed strength and endurance that seemed to have no practical limits, even under the extreme stress of a life-threatening emergency. The successful extraction of Martinez from the debris required nearly 30 minutes of sustained maximum effort under deteriorating conditions, with hurricane winds now exceeding 80 miles per hour and structural damage to the building continuing to worsen. Sarah's ability to maintain peak performance throughout the rescue while coordinating team efforts and monitoring safety conditions demonstrated comprehensive capabilities that went far beyond normal recruit training and preparation. But the rescue operation was only the beginning of the challenge facing Sarah's team. Martinez's injuries required immediate medical attention, but the storm conditions had made normal evacuation routes impassable. The medical facility was located on the opposite side of the base, a distance of nearly 2 miles through terrain that was now flooded and obstructed by storm debris. Additionally, the hurricane's intensity had reached levels that made vehicular transportation impossible, requiring any evacuation to be completed on foot through increasingly dangerous conditions. The decision to attempt the evacuation was Sarah's to make, as Sergeant Kim had deferred to her judgment after witnessing her performance during the rescue operation. The risks were significant, as the storm conditions would make the journey extremely hazardous for both the rescue team and Martinez, whose injuries made him unable to assist in his own evacuation. However, the alternative of waiting for the storm to pass would likely result in serious complications from Martinez's injuries, making the immediate evacuation attempt the best option despite the dangers involved. The evacuation plan that Sarah developed required her to carry Martinez across the 2-mile distance while navigating flooded terrain, debris obstacles, and wind conditions that made normal movement nearly impossible. The physical demands of the task would have been extraordinary under normal conditions, but the hurricane environment created additional challenges that pushed the limits of human endurance and capability. Sarah's preparation for the evacuation included improvised equipment modifications that would allow her to carry Martinez safely while maintaining her own mobility and stability in the severe weather conditions. Her approach demonstrated mechanical engineering knowledge and practical problem-solving abilities that enabled her to create effective solutions using only materials that were immediately available. The journey that followed would become legendary in Marine Corps emergency response history. Sarah carried Martinez across flooded terrain and through debris fields while maintaining a pace that ensured rapid medical attention while avoiding unnecessary risks to either of them. Her navigation skills proved exceptional as she identified safe routes through the storm-damaged landscape, avoiding hazards that could have resulted in additional injuries or delays. Her physical performance during the evacuation exceeded anything that had been documented in Marine Corps' emergency response records. She maintained her carrying pace for the entire 2-mile distance, despite wind conditions that made normal walking difficult and terrain that required constant adaptation and problem-solving to navigate successfully. Her endurance and strength seemed unlimited even under conditions that would have defeated most Marines working as a team. The arrival at the medical facility marked the successful completion of a rescue and evacuation operation that had required every aspect of Sarah's extraordinary capabilities. Martinez's injuries were serious but not life-threatening, thanks to the rapid medical attention that Sarah's efforts had made possible. The medical staff's assessment confirmed that the delay caused by waiting for the storm to pass would likely have resulted in permanent complications, making Sarah's evacuation decision crucial for Martinez's long-term recovery. The documentation of Sarah's performance during the hurricane emergency would become part of Marine Corps' training materials for emergency response and leadership development. However, the immediate impact was the recognition that her capabilities extended far beyond physical performance to include tactical thinking, leadership skills, and problem-solving abilities that qualified her for the most demanding roles within the Marine Corps' structure. The storm's passage revealed the full extent of damage to Parris Island's facilities, but also highlighted the effectiveness of emergency procedures and the exceptional performance of personnel who had risen to meet unprecedented challenges. Sarah's actions during the crisis had saved lives and preserved critical equipment, while demonstrating capabilities that exceeded every existing standard for recruit performance and potential. As the base began recovery operations in the aftermath of Hurricane Delilah, Sarah found herself facing questions about her background and training that would determine her future assignments and career opportunities within the Marine Corps. The extraordinary capability she had demonstrated could no longer be dismissed as anomalies or measurement errors, requiring a complete reevaluation of her potential and the roles where her abilities could be most effectively utilized in service to the Corps' mission. The medal ceremony that took place 6 weeks after Hurricane Delilah would forever change how the Marine Corps understood the relationship between individual capability and institutional recognition. Sarah Chun stood at attention in dress blue uniform as Commandant General Robert Mitchell prepared to present her with the Navy and Marine Corps Medal for Heroism, the highest non-combat decoration awarded by the Department of the Navy. The citation read aloud to the assembled audience. Detailed actions that had saved multiple lives and preserved critical military assets under conditions of extreme danger and personal risk. The audience gathered for the ceremony included not only Sarah's fellow graduates from Parris Island, but also senior officers from Marine Corps headquarters who had come specifically to meet the recruit whose performance had challenged fundamental assumptions about training effectiveness and capability assessment. Among them was Brigadier General Helen Torres, the Marine Corps' highest-ranking female officer, who had requested a personal meeting with Sarah to discuss career opportunities that extended far beyond normal enlisted assignments. The investigation that had followed the hurricane response had revealed details about Sarah's background that explained her extraordinary capabilities while raising questions about military recruiting and assessment procedures. The farm in rural Nebraska, where Sarah had grown up, was not the simple agricultural operation that her enlistment record suggested, but rather a specialized training facility that her grandfather had established for developing physical and tactical skills in young people from military families. Thomas Chun's background was far more complex than Sarah had ever revealed during her enlistment processing. He was a retired Army Special Forces operator who had served in classified operations across 3 decades of military service. After his retirement, he had purchased the Nebraska farm as a cover for a private training program that prepared children and young adults for military service using techniques that were far more advanced than anything available through conventional channels. The training that Sarah had received from her grandfather included not only the physical conditioning that had enabled her record-breaking performances, but also tactical skills, leadership development, and specialized techniques that were normally reserved for elite military units. Her ability to perform under extreme stress, solve complex problems rapidly, and maintain peak physical performance under adverse conditions had been developed through years of systematic preparation that few military recruits ever received. The disclosure of Sarah's true background created both admiration and controversy within Marine Corps leadership circles. Some officers viewed her concealment of relevant training as a form of deception that violated the trust relationship between recruits and their service branch. Others recognized that her grandfather's discretion had been necessary to protect the classified nature of his background and the specialized training methods he employed with selected individuals. General Torres's perspective on the situation was pragmatic and forward-looking. She understood that Sarah's capabilities represented an opportunity to advance Marine Corps' training effectiveness and to demonstrate that exceptional performance could emerge from unconventional backgrounds. Rather than focusing on the irregularities in Sarah's enlistment process, Torres was interested in leveraging Sarah's abilities for the benefit of the entire organization. The career counseling session that followed the medal ceremony revealed opportunities that Sarah had never imagined when she first enlisted in the Marine Corps. Her performance during boot camp and the hurricane emergency had attracted attention from multiple specialized units that normally recruited only from experienced personnel with years of conventional military service. The options presented to her included assignments that would utilize her physical capabilities, leadership potential, and problem-solving skills in roles that could significantly impact Marine Corps operations and training development. The force reconnaissance opportunity was perhaps the most prestigious, offering immediate assignment to one of the Marine Corps' most elite units without the years of preparatory service that normally preceded such assignments. Force Recon Marines operated in small teams behind enemy lines, conducting intelligence gathering and direct action missions that required the highest levels of physical fitness, tactical competence, and mental resilience. Sarah's demonstrated abilities aligned perfectly with Force Recon requirements, and her performance record suggested that she could succeed in the demanding training program that preceded operational assignments. The training development position offered a different type of opportunity, focusing on Sarah's potential to revolutionize Marine Corps' physical conditioning and emergency response procedures. Her grandfather's training methods had produced results that exceeded anything achieved through conventional approaches, suggesting that significant improvements in overall Marine Corps' capability could be realized through systematic implementation of his techniques. The position would involve extensive travel to training facilities worldwide, working with instructors and developing new programs that could enhance the performance of thousands of Marines. The military intelligence assignment represented yet another career path, utilizing Sarah's analytical abilities and tactical thinking, skills and roles that supported strategic planning and operational decision-making. Her performance during the hurricane emergency had demonstrated problem-solving capabilities and situational awareness that qualified her for intelligence analysis positions that normally required extensive, specialized training and security clearances. Private Rodriguez's reaction to Sarah's recognition and career opportunities was complex and ultimately transformative for his own understanding of military service and personal development. His initial response had been defensive, as Sarah's success forced him to confront the reality that his previous judgments had been based on superficial observations rather than accurate assessment of capability and potential. However, over time, his attitude evolved into genuine respect and admiration for what Sarah had accomplished through dedication and preparation. The conversation that Rodriguez initiated with Sarah several days after the medal ceremony revealed his desire to understand how she had developed capabilities that so far exceeded normal expectations. His questions were respectful and genuinely curious, reflecting a new appreciation for the complexity of human potential and the limitations of his previous assumptions about strength, capability, and military success. Sarah's response to Rodriguez's questions was characteristically thoughtful and generous, sharing insights about training methods and mental preparation without revealing specific details about her grandfather's classified background. She emphasized that exceptional performance was available to anyone willing to commit to systematic preparation and continuous improvement, regardless of their starting point or natural advantages. Her approach to mentoring Rodriguez reflected the leadership qualities that had emerged during the hurricane crisis. Private Walsh's career development had also been influenced by Sarah's example, inspiring her to pursue opportunities that challenged her own assumptions about her potential and capabilities. Walsh's decision to apply for officer candidate school was directly motivated by observing Sarah's leadership during emergency conditions and recognizing that effective leadership emerged from competence and character rather than formal authority or traditional qualifications. The friendship that developed between Sarah and Walsh was based on mutual respect and shared commitment to excellence in military service. Walsh's background in civilian athletics provided a different perspective on training and performance optimization that complemented Sarah's grandfather's methods. Their collaboration on training techniques and performance strategies would eventually contribute to improvements in Marine Corps' physical conditioning programs that benefited thousands of personnel. The instructional role that Sarah accepted at the Marine Corps' Physical Fitness Academy represented a compromise between the various career opportunities that had been offered to her. The position allowed her to remain involved in training development while maintaining the hands-on involvement with personnel development that she found most rewarding. Her assignment included responsibilities for developing new training programs, instructing advanced courses, and conducting research into human performance optimization. The training programs that Sarah developed incorporated her grandfather's methods while adapting them for implementation within existing Marine Corps systems and procedures. Her approach emphasized individual capability development rather than standardized procedures, recognizing that peak performance required personalized training plans that addressed each Marine's specific strengths and improvement areas. The results achieved through her programs exceeded traditional benchmarks by significant margins while reducing injury rates and training time requirements. The research component of Sarah's assignment focused on documenting and systematizing the training methods that had produced her own extraordinary capabilities. Working with exercise physiologists and sports medicine specialists, she participated in studies that revealed physiological and psychological factors that contributed to exceptional performance under stress. The findings from this research were incorporated into Marine Corps training doctrine and shared with other military branches through professional conferences and publications. Sarah's influence on Marine Corps culture extended beyond training programs to encompass broader questions about diversity, capability assessment, and the recognition of non-traditional paths to military excellence. Her success had demonstrated that exceptional performers could emerge from backgrounds that didn't conform to conventional expectations, encouraging recruiters and training personnel to look beyond surface characteristics when evaluating potential. The speaking engagements that became part of Sarah's responsibilities included presentations at military academies, training conferences, and leadership development programs throughout the Department of Defense. Her message emphasized the importance of systematic preparation, mental resilience, and the willingness to challenge assumptions about human potential. These presentations were consistently well received and contributed to changes in training philosophy across multiple military branches. The mentorship program that Sarah established at the Physical Fitness Academy provided personalized guidance to Marines who showed potential for exceptional performance but needed additional support to realize their capabilities. The program paired high-potential individuals with experienced mentors who provided technical instruction, motivational support, and career guidance tailored to each participant's goals and circumstances. The long-term impact of Sarah's military service extended far beyond her individual achievements to influence generations of Marines who were inspired by her example and benefited from the training innovations she developed. The performance standards she established became benchmarks for excellence that motivated thousands of personnel to pursue higher levels of capability and commitment. Her demonstration that extraordinary performance was achievable through dedication and proper preparation became a fundamental principle of Marine Corps' training philosophy. The retirement ceremony that marked the end of Sarah's 20-year military career was attended by Marines from around the world who had been influenced by her example and training methods. The tributes delivered during the ceremony highlighted not only her individual achievements, but also her contributions to organizational capability and the development of other personnel. Her legacy was measured not just in records broken or decorations earned, but in the enhanced performance of countless Marines who had benefited from her innovations. The civilian career that Sarah pursued after military retirement focused on extending her training methods and performance philosophy to broader audiences through corporate consulting, athletic coaching, and educational program development. Her approach to human potential development found applications in business, education, and sports that demonstrated the universal applicability of principles she had learned through military service. The farm in Colorado that Sarah purchased after retirement became a training center that continued her grandfather's legacy while adapting his methods for contemporary applications. The facility served military personnel, competitive athletes, emergency responders, and other individuals whose careers required exceptional physical and mental performance. The programs offered at the center incorporated decades of research and development while maintaining the personalized approach that had been central to Thomas Chun's original training philosophy. The scholarship program that Sarah established provided opportunities for young people from disadvantaged backgrounds to receive the kind of comprehensive training that had shaped her own development. The program emphasized not only physical conditioning, but also character development, leadership skills, and the mental resilience required for success in demanding careers. Graduates of the program went on to distinguished service in military, emergency response, and other professions that benefited society. Years after her retirement from active duty, Sarah Chun's influence continued to shape Marine Corps' training and inspire individuals who faced challenges that seemed insurmountable. Her story had become part of military tradition, demonstrating that exceptional achievement was possible for anyone willing to commit to systematic preparation and continuous improvement. The simple farm girl who had been underestimated and mocked had become a symbol of human potential and the power of determination to overcome any obstacle. The lesson that resonated most strongly from Sarah's journey was that true capability often remained hidden until circumstances demanded its revelation. Her example encouraged others to look beyond surface appearances and conventional expectations, recognizing that extraordinary performance could emerge from the most unlikely sources when proper preparation met opportunity and determination. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Colorado mountains as Sarah Chun stood before a group of 12 young recruits who had traveled from across the country to attend her specialized training program. 25 years had passed since her legendary performance at Parris Island, and the facility she had built on her grandfather's principles had become the most sought-after preparation program for military service in the United States. Recruits before her represented the newest generation of individuals who refused to accept limitations that others tried to place on them. Among the group was Marcus Thompson, Jr., son of the drill sergeant who had once dismissed Sarah's potential. During those early weeks of boot camp, The younger Thompson had grown up hearing stories about the recruit who had shattered every assumption about human capability, and he had specifically requested admission to Sarah's program after completing his own basic military training. His presence represented a full-circle moment that highlighted how far perceptions had evolved since Sarah's groundbreaking achievements. Also present was Elena Rodriguez, niece of the private who had initially mocked Sarah's quiet demeanor and unassuming appearance. Elena had enlisted in the Air Force Special Operations Command and was preparing for the most demanding training in military aviation. Her family's stories about Sarah's transformation had inspired her to pursue goals that extended far beyond conventional expectations for female aviators, and she sought the kind of comprehensive preparation that Sarah's program provided. Training methodology that Sarah had developed over decades of research and practical application represented an evolution of her grandfather's original concepts, enhanced by modern understanding of human performance and psychological development. The program addressed not only physical conditioning, but also mental resilience, tactical thinking, and the character development that enabled individuals to perform at their peak when stakes were highest. Each component was carefully integrated to produce comprehensive capability rather than specialized skills in isolation. The physical training component of Sarah's program was based on functional movement patterns that developed strength, endurance, agility, and coordination through activities that replicated real-world challenges, rather than focusing on standardized exercises that produced uniform results. Her approach emphasized individual optimization that allowed each participant to discover and develop their unique combination of capabilities. The methods produced results that consistently exceeded conventional training benchmarks while reducing injury rates and training time requirements. But perhaps more importantly, Sarah's program addressed the psychological factors that determined whether individuals could access their full potential under pressure. The mental conditioning component included stress inoculation training, confidence-building exercises, and techniques for maintaining focus and decision-making effectiveness when facing uncertainty and adversity. These psychological skills were often more important than physical capabilities in determining success in demanding careers and challenging situations. The character development aspect of the program reflected Sarah's understanding that true excellence required more than individual capability. Participants learned about leadership, teamwork, ethical decision-making, and the responsibility that came with exceptional ability. Sarah's approach emphasized that extraordinary capability created obligations to serve others and contribute to something larger than personal achievement. Young Marcus Thompson's progress through the program demonstrated how much training philosophy had evolved since his father's era. Where the elder Thompson had relied on intimidation and standardized procedures to identify potential, Sarah's methods revealed and developed capabilities that might otherwise remain hidden. Marcus's own journey from uncertainty to confidence paralleled his father's evolution from skepticism to recognition of Sarah's contributions to military training. The relationship that developed between Sarah and Marcus Thompson Jr. was particularly meaningful, as it represented the healing of misunderstandings from the past while building bridges to future possibilities. Marcus had initially carried some of his father's doubts about unconventional approaches to training, but his direct experience with Sarah's methods had convinced him of their effectiveness. His progress through the program exceeded his own expectations and demonstrated that the principles Sarah taught were applicable across generations and circumstances. Elena Rodriguez's experience in the program provided evidence that Sarah's methods were equally effective for developing capabilities in different military specialties and career fields. Elena's preparation for Air Force Special Operations training required not only physical conditioning but also the kind of spatial awareness, multitasking ability, and stress management that characterize successful aviators. Sarah's program addressed all of these requirements through integrated training that developed comprehensive, capability rather than isolated skills. The success rates achieved by graduates of Sarah's program had attracted attention from military leadership across all service branches, as well as civilian organizations that required exceptional performance from their personnel. Emergency response agencies, law enforcement units, competitive athletic programs, and corporate leadership development initiatives had all incorporated elements of Sarah's training philosophy with remarkable results. The principles she had discovered and systematized appeared to have universal application wherever human performance mattered. The research component of Sarah's facility had become a recognized center for studies in human performance optimization, stress physiology, and leadership development. University researchers, military scientists, and corporate consultants regularly visited the facility to observe training methods and participate in studies that advanced understanding of human potential. The findings from this research were published in professional journals and incorporated into training programs worldwide. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, who had served alongside Sarah during their boot camp days and later became a sports medicine specialist, was now the facility's chief research officer. Her background in both military service and medical science provided unique insights into the physiological and psychological factors that enabled exceptional performance. The collaboration between Sarah and Dr. Walsh had produced innovations in training methodology that were being adopted by military and civilian organizations globally. The documentation of training methods and performance outcomes at Sarah's facility had become required. Reading at military academies and leadership schools throughout the Department of Defense. The case studies developed from participant experiences provided concrete examples of how individuals could exceed their own expectations through proper preparation and mental conditioning. These materials were particularly valuable for instructors who worked with personnel from diverse backgrounds and varying levels of initial capability. The international recognition that Sarah's program had received included invitations to train personnel from allied military forces and to present her methods at conferences around the world. Her influence on military training philosophy extended far beyond American forces to include special operations units, emergency response teams, and leadership development programs in dozens of countries. The universal applicability of her principles demonstrated that excellence was achievable regardless of cultural background or institutional context. The technology integration that had evolved within Sarah's program represented a careful balance between innovation and proven principles. While modern equipment and measurement systems were used to enhance training effectiveness and monitor progress, the fundamental emphasis remained on developing internal capabilities rather than dependence on external tools. Participants learned to use technology as an aid to performance rather than a substitute for personal capability and judgment. The alumni network that had grown from Sarah's program included leaders in military, emergency response, business, education, and athletic fields who maintained connections with the facility and with each other. This network provided ongoing support for program graduates and created opportunities for collaboration and mutual assistance that extended the program's impact far beyond the initial training period. Many alumni returned to serve as instructors or mentors, creating a cycle of development that strengthened the program continuously. The scholarship program that Sarah had established ensured that financial limitations would not prevent qualified individuals from accessing the training they needed to realize their potential. Funding for scholarships came from program alumni, corporate sponsors, and military organizations that recognized the value of investing in human development. The scholarship recipients often became the most successful graduates, demonstrating that motivation and commitment were more important than economic background in determining training outcomes. The facility expansion that had occurred over the years reflected the growing demand for Sarah's training methods and the need to accommodate larger numbers of participants. The Colorado location now included multiple training areas, research laboratories, dormitory facilities, and specialized equipment that supported every aspect of the comprehensive program. However, the personal attention and individualized approach that characterized Sarah's original methods remained central to the training experience. The mentorship component of the program paired each participant with experienced graduates who provided guidance, support, and encouragement throughout the training process and beyond. This relationship often continued for years after program completion, creating lasting bonds that supported ongoing development and career advancement. The mentorship network had become one of the program's most valuable features, providing participants with access to wisdom and experience that accelerated their professional and personal growth. The family programs that Sarah had developed recognized that exceptional individuals often came from families that supported and encouraged their development. These programs provided training and education for family members, helping them understand how to provide effective support and encouragement for their high-achieving relatives. The family component had proven particularly important for younger participants who needed strong support systems to maintain their commitment to excellence. The corporate partnerships that had developed around Sarah's program provided opportunities for graduates to apply their capabilities in civilian careers that valued exceptional performance and leadership. These partnerships also provided funding for program development and created pathways for continued growth and advancement that extended beyond military service. The corporate connections had become an important resource for participants who chose civilian careers after completing their military obligations. The legacy planning that Sarah had undertaken ensured that her training methods and facility would continue operating effectively long after her own retirement. The succession planning process included training multiple instructors in her methods, documenting procedures comprehensively, and establishing governance structures that would maintain program quality and effectiveness. The legacy planning reflected Sarah's understanding that true success was measured by sustainable impact rather than individual achievement. The annual reunion that brought together graduates from all years of the program had become a significant event that celebrated achievements, renewed relationships, and provided opportunities for continued learning and development. The reunion featured presentations by successful graduates, workshops on advanced techniques, and recognition ceremonies that honored exceptional service and achievement. These gatherings reinforced the values and principles that the program represented while inspiring continued excellence. The evaluation studies that had been conducted on program graduates demonstrated remarkable long-term success rates in military advancement, civilian career achievement, and personal satisfaction. The comprehensive development approach that characterized Sarah's methods produced individuals who were not only physically capable, but also mentally resilient, emotionally mature, and committed to serving others. These outcomes validated the holistic approach that distinguished the program from more narrowly focused training alternatives. The influence that Sarah's story had on popular culture included books, documentaries, and educational materials that shared her message with broader audiences. These productions emphasized themes of perseverance, the dangers of underestimating others, and the potential that existed within every individual when proper preparation met opportunity. The cultural impact extended Sarah's influence far beyond military and professional training to inspire people in all walks of life. The speaking engagements that remained part of Sarah's schedule took her to schools, corporations, military installations, and conferences where she shared insights about human potential and the importance of looking beyond surface appearances when evaluating capability. Her presentations consistently received positive responses and generated lasting impact on audiences who were inspired to reconsider their own assumptions about what was possible in their lives and careers. The awards and recognition that Sarah had received over the years included not only military decorations, but also civilian honors that acknowledged her contributions to human development and training innovation. These recognitions reflected the broad impact of her work and the respect she had earned from diverse communities. However, Sarah's greatest satisfaction came from the success of individuals who had benefited from her programs and gone on to achieve their own remarkable accomplishments. The personal reflection that occupied Sarah's quieter moments often returned to the lessons her grandfather had taught her about the importance of using exceptional ability in service to others. Her own journey from underestimated recruit to respected leader had been guided by principles that emphasized responsibility, humility, and commitment to something larger than personal achievement. These values continued to shape her approach to training and development as she worked with each new generation of participants. The evening conversations that Sarah shared with current program participants often focused on the importance of maintaining perspective about success and the obligations that came with exceptional capability. She emphasized that true strength was demonstrated through helping others discover their own potential, rather than simply showcasing individual achievements. These discussions were among the most valuable aspects of the program as they helped participants understand that excellence was about contribution rather than recognition. The quiet moments that Sarah spent in the Colorado mountains, watching the sun set over the facility her grandfather's legacy had made possible, provided opportunities for gratitude and reflection on how far she had traveled from those early days at Parris Island. The simple farm girl who had been mocked and dismissed had become a symbol of human potential and the power of determination. But more importantly, she had created opportunities for others to discover their own extraordinary capabilities. The final lesson that Sarah's story offered was that true victory was measured not by personal achievement, but by the positive impact on others and the lasting change created in the world. Her legacy lived on in every individual who refused to accept limitations, every person who looked beyond surface appearances to recognize potential, and every leader who understood that excellence was about bringing out the best in others, rather than proving superiority over them. The transformation that had begun on a misty morning at Parris Island continued to ripple outward through the lives of people who had never met Sarah but had been inspired by her example to pursue their own impossible dreams. In a world that often celebrated the loudest voices and most obvious talents, Sarah Chun had proven that quiet determination and systematic preparation could achieve anything. Her story would continue inspiring generations of individuals who understood that being underestimated was simply another form of tactical advantage, and that the greatest victories belonged to those who never stopped believing in what they could become. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.